She kissed a stranger to escape her toxic ex, unaware he was the mafia boss who'd never let her go. The bell above the door of the gilded cage chimed, a sound swallowed instantly by the heavy bass of the music and the din of a Friday night crowd. For Amelia, the chime was a gunshot. She stumbled in, her breath fogging in the warm, whiskey-scented air, her hands shaking so badly she could barely push the heavy oak door closed against the late-night chill. She was running. She had been running. It felt like for weeks. Ever since she'd finally found the courage to pack one bag, leave her key on the table, and walk out of Brandon's apartment. But he hadn't let go. The breakup was merely an inconvenience to him, a challenge. The calls, numbering in the hundreds, had been the start. Then came the texts, a deluge of vitriol and desperate pleas. Tonight, it escalated. He had been waiting outside her building, parked in the shadow of the alley. She had seen the dark shape of him behind the wheel and had not even gone inside, just turned and ran, her heart clawing its way up her throat. Now, she pressed herself against the wall of the bar, scanning the room with wide, terrified eyes. It was dark, the only light coming from the amber glow behind the rows of bottles and the small, flickering electric candles on the tables. It was crowded. Good. She could hide. She just needed a corner, a shadow, anywhere to disappear for an hour, long enough for him to give up and leave her street. She started to weave through the clusters of laughing people, feeling exposed and raw. Her trench coat, damp from the misty rain, felt paper thin. She was almost to the back, near the restrooms, when the front door slammed open again. This time, the chime was overshadowed by a voice. "Amelia!" The entire bar seemed to flinch. The music, the laughter, it all dipped for a second. Amelia froze. It was him. He was here. He had followed her. Panic, cold and absolute, seized her. She looked left, right, a wall of people, a line for the bar. No exit. "Amelia, I know you're in here. You bitch!" Her blood ran cold. She saw him storming toward the center of the room, his face a mask of rage, his eyes scanning. He was going to find her. He was going to drag her out. He was going to... Her gaze landed on a man. He was sitting alone in a deep, shadowed booth, his back to the wall. He was tall, even sitting, and wore a suit so dark and sharply tailored it seemed to drink the light. He wasn't watching the spectacle Brandon was creating. He was watching her. Amelia didn't think. She didn't plan. It was pure, primal instinct, a cornered animal seeking the deepest shadow. She moved. She crossed the 3 yards between them in 2 strides. He looked up. His eyes, impossibly dark, intense, meeting hers. There was no surprise in them, no alarm, just a still, waiting assessment. She reached the booth, put one hand on the worn leather of the seat, and leaned in. "Please," she whispered. A sound he probably didn't even hear. And then, with her heart threatening to burst from her chest, Amelia grabbed the lapels of his expensive jacket, closed her eyes, and kissed him. It was a crash. Her lips were cold, clumsy with panic. She pressed against him, trying to angle her body to shield her face from the room, praying to be invisible. She smelled his scent, not cologne, but something cleaner, sharper, soap, starch, and something uniquely, unsettlingly male. For a second, the man, the stranger, remained perfectly still. She felt the solid, unyielding wall of his chest. He could have pushed her off. He could have shouted. He should have. He did neither. Instead, a hand, large and warm, settled on the small of her back. It wasn't tentative. It was firm, assured, and possessive. It anchored her. His other hand came up, not to her face, but to the back of her head, his fingers threading into her hair, holding her steady. He took control. He shifted, deepening the kiss just enough to make it look utterly convincing. His lips were not soft. They were firm, practiced, and devastatingly calm. He angled his head, blocking her completely from the view of the room. He was a shield. Amelia felt the presence of Brandon before she heard him. A wave of cold, familiar dread washed over her. His heavy, angry footsteps stopped right beside their booth. She tensed, her entire body rigid, her eyes squeezed shut, her lips still pressed to the stranger's. "Fucking useless," Brandon snarled, not at them, but to himself. He was so close. Amelia could smell the sour beer on his breath. She waited for a hand to grab her hair, to rip her away. It never came. She heard Brandon grunt in frustration. Then his footsteps moved on, heavy and aggressive, stomping toward the back of the bar, toward the restrooms. He had passed them. He hadn't seen her. Amelia sagged against the stranger, her forehead falling to his shoulder. A broken, silent sob trapped in her throat. The stranger didn't let go. His hand remained at her back, a solid point of heat, his other hand still lightly tangled in her hair. "He's gone," a voice rumbled, low and deep, directly against her ear. For now. He loosened his grip, and Amelia pulled back, mortified. She slid onto the bench opposite him, her hands hidden in her lap so he wouldn't see them shake. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, her voice hoarse. I didn't know what else to do. He was..." "I saw." His voice was calm. It was the calmest thing in the entire city. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time. He was older than her, maybe in his early 30s. His face was all sharp angles, a strong jaw, a straight nose, dark brows, but it was his eyes that held her. They were dark, almost black, and they watched her with an unnerving, protective intensity. He hadn't been kissed by a frantic stranger in a bar. He had just finished a business transaction. A waiter appeared, his eyes wide from Brandon's outburst. The stranger didn't even look at him. "A Macallan, neat, and a brandy for the lady." The waiter nodded and disappeared. "I don't..." Amelia started. "You do," the man said. It wasn't a suggestion. "Drink it. Your hands are shaking." She pressed them together. "I shouldn't have done that. That was insane. I'm sorry." "You did what you had to do to survive," he said, his gaze unwavering. "Is he your husband?" "No." Amelia shook her head, the motion too sharp. "My ex. We broke up weeks ago. He just won't accept it. He put his hands on you." It wasn't a question. Amelia's gaze dropped. She instinctively pulled the sleeve of her coat down, covering the faint, yellowing purple bruise on her wrist that she'd gotten from Brandon grabbing her 2 nights ago. The stranger's eyes followed the movement. A flicker of something cold and dangerous passed through his expression, so fast she almost missed it. The drinks arrived. Amelia wrapped her hands around the small glass, letting the fumes burn her nose. She took a small sip. It was on fire, and it was focused. "You can't go home," he said. Her head snapped up. "What? He was waiting for you there, wasn't he?" She stared at him, her fear twisting into suspicion. "How do you know that? You ran from the street into a random bar. You weren't here to drink. You were hiding. He followed you from somewhere. The most likely place is your home." He leaned forward, his forearms resting on the table. "I'm right, aren't I?" She nodded, her throat tight. "He'll be there. He's always there. My driver is outside." Amelia tensed. "I don't need a driver. He can take you to a hotel, a friend's house, somewhere safe. You wait there. And in the morning, you file a report." "I already did," she said, the words bitter. They said they can't do anything until he actually hurts me." The man's jaw tightened. "Then they are fools." He took a sip of his whiskey. "My offer stands. My driver will take you. You don't have to see him again." She looked at him, this calm, dangerous, sharply dressed man offering her solutions she couldn't afford. She had escaped one controlling man. She wasn't about to put herself in the debt of another. "Who are you?" she asked. A small, humorless smile touched one side of his mouth. "Just a man who understands monsters. My name is Alessio." "I can't," she said, sliding out of the booth. "Thank you for playing along, but I can't. You need to be safe. I can take care of myself." She was already backing away. "What's your name?" he called after her. She hesitated at the edge of the booth's shadow. "Jess?" she lied. Alessio watched her go, a small, quick shadow disappearing back into the crowd and out the front door. He watched her through the window as she hurried down the street, not toward the uptown bus, but downtown, disappearing around the corner. He took out his phone and dialed a number. "Luca," he said, his voice low. A woman just left the gilded cage, 5'6", brown hair, green eyes, terrified. She's wearing a gray trench coat. Her name is not Jess. Find her. I want to know who she is, and I want to know everything about the man she's running from." He paused, swirling the whiskey in his glass. "Put a man in her apartment, discreetly. She's not to be followed, she's to be protected. And Luca, she's not letting me disappear. I'm not letting her vanish either." 2 days later, Amelia was trying to breathe. She sat at a small, wrought iron table outside the Corner Reed, a tiny cafe and bookstore that was her one true sanctuary. It was noon. The sun was bright, the air was crisp, and she was trying to read a novel, but her eyes had passed over the same paragraph 4 times. She had spent the last 2 nights at her friend Sarah's place, sleeping on a lumpy futon, jumping at every creak in the hallway. Brandon hadn't called or texted since that night. The silence was, in many ways, worse than the noise. A shadow fell over her table. Amelia flinched, her body tensing, her coffee cup rattling in its saucer. "You're a difficult woman to find. Jess," that voice, that deep, calm rumble. She looked up, her heart leaping into her throat for an entirely different reason. It was him, Alessio. He wasn't in a suit. He wore dark, tailored trousers and a black cashmere sweater that made him look less like a businessman and more like a predator resting in the sun. "Alessio," she breathed, her hand going to her chest. "You scared me." "My apologies," he said. Though his eyes held no apology at all, they held amusement. "Imagine seeing you here. This is my spot," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "What are you doing here?" "Appreciating the neighborhood." He gestured to the empty chair. "May I?" He sat before she could answer, signaling a passing waiter with a simple, barely there lift of his chin. The waiter hurried over. "Espresso, doppio." "Are you following me, Alessio?" Amelia asked, her defenses rising. "I'm enjoying a coincidence." He turned his full attention back to her. "You look better in the daylight. You have color in your cheeks." "And you look out of place," she countered. His lips quirked. "Do I? I find I fit in exactly where I want to be." He leaned forward, the small table suddenly feeling intimate. "The man from the bar. Your ex. He hasn't bothered you?" "No," she said, wary. "He's been quiet." "Good." He said it with a finality that sent a chill down her spine. "Why are you here? Really?" she asked. "I was worried about you," he said simply. "You ran out into the night, scared, with nowhere to go. And you gave me a fake name." Amelia flushed. "You don't know my name. You'd be surprised what I know." The air between them crackled. This was not the gratitude and panic of the bar. This was something else. A flirtation, maybe. But it felt heavier, more dangerous. Her walls, so carefully rebuilt over the last 2 days, were still standing. But he was looking at them like he knew exactly where the cracks were. "I should go," she said, gathering her book. "Why?" he asked, his voice low. "Are you scared of him? Or of me?" She met his gaze. "I'm not scared of you." "Good," he said, "because you have no reason to be." As he said it, a car turned the corner, a loud, obnoxious muscle car with a rumbling engine. It cruised past the cafe and Amelia saw him. Brandon! He was behind the wheel, sunglasses on, staring right at her. She froze. Her breath hitched, the blood drained from her face. The world narrowed to that car. Alessio didn't look at the car. His eyes never left her face. He saw the terror blossom, saw her knuckles turn white on her book. "He has good timing," Alessio murmured. "What?" she whispered, her eyes still locked on the car as it slowed to a crawl. "He's about to see you're no longer available." He leaned across the table. It wasn't her desperate lunge this time. It was his deliberate, calculated advance. He didn't grab her. His hand came up to cup her jaw, his thumb stroking the soft skin just beneath her ear. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice a soft growl. Her terrified gaze snapped from the street to his. "Amelia." Her eyes widened. He knew. He knew her name. Before she could form a word, before she could even breathe, his lips were on hers. It was nothing like the first time. The first kiss was a desperate, icy crash. This was a claim. It was slow and deep and possessed a deliberate heat that started in her stomach and flooded her entire body. It was not violent. It was infinitely more dangerous. It was a promise. He tasted dark espresso and something possessive. Her lips, which had been pressed thin with fear, softened under his, parting on a sigh she hadn't meant to release. The car engine revved, a furious, wounded sound. Tires squealed on the pavement as Brandon sped away, but Alessio didn't pull back. He deepened the kiss, his thumb still tracing the line of her jaw, holding her captive, teaching her the rhythm of his mouth. He was erasing the memory of the panicked kiss in the bar and replacing it with this, an invasion, an ownership. Amelia didn't pull away. Her hand, which had been clutching her book, uncurled. Her fingers rested on his forearm, feeling the coiled, powerful strength there. The world, which had been sharp and terrifying, melted into a warm, dangerous blur. When he finally drew back, it was only an inch. His eyes were dark, stormy, and fixed on her mouth. "That," he breathed, his voice rough, "is how you kiss a man goodbye, and how you kiss me hello." The buzzing of the phone on the bedside table sounded like a drill against the silence of the apartment. It was 3 a.m. Amelia lay frozen under her duvet, staring at the ceiling, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. The screen lit up the room with a ghostly blue glow, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the stale air. She did not look at it. She knew who it was. For the last 48 hours, the silence Brandon had maintained after the incident at the cafe had shattered. It started with texts, apologies that morphed into accusations, then into rambling, incoherent threats. Then came the notes. Just pieces of lined yellow paper folded into tight squares and slipped under her door. "I know you're inside. Why are you doing this to us? Pick up the phone." She'd gone to the police station that afternoon, clutching a plastic bag containing the notes. The desk sergeant, a man with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his uniform, had barely looked up. He told her that, without a direct threat of violence, without physical harm, it was a civil matter. He told her to block the number. He told her to move, as if uprooting her life was as simple as changing a shirt. The buzzing stopped, leaving a ringing silence in its wake. Amelia exhaled, her breath trembling. She turned on her side, pulling her knees to her chest. She felt small. She felt hunted. The lock on her front door was a standard deadbolt. Brandon had a key to the building's main entrance from when they were together. It was only a matter of time. Down on the street, 3 stories below, the night was not empty. A dark sedan sat idling 2 blocks down, its lights off. Inside, Brandon gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, his eyes fixed on the 3rd-floor window where a dim light had just flickered out. He reached for the door handle, his jaw set in a grim line of determination. He was going to make her listen. He was going to make her see reason. He stepped out of the car, the cool night air hitting his flushed face. He took 2 steps toward the apartment building before a shadow detached itself from the alleyway entrance. "That is far enough." Brandon froze. The man who stepped into the streetlight was massive, his shoulders broad under a leather jacket. He was not alone. Another man, leaner but moving with the silent grace of a predator, stepped out from behind a parked van. "Who the hell are you?" Brandon snapped, though his voice wavered. "Get out of my way." The larger man didn't blink. He didn't posture or raise his voice. He simply opened his jacket slightly, revealing nothing but the suggestion of something heavy at his waist. "Go home, Brandon. This street is closed to you. You can't tell me what to do. My girlfriend lives there." "She is not your girlfriend," the man said, his voice like gravel grinding together. "And if you come within a mile of her again, the police will be the least of your worries. We won't file a report. We will file you away." Brandon looked from one man to the other. He saw no hesitation in their eyes, only a professional. Bored potential for violence. The rage in his chest flickered and died, replaced by the cold instinct of self-preservation. He spat on the ground, turned on his heel, and marched back to his car. Upstairs, Amelia heard the faint sound of a car door slamming and tires screeching away. She waited for the buzzer to ring. It never did. The next evening, A knock at her door sent her scrambling into the kitchen. Her hands shook as she pulled the largest chef's knife from the wooden block. She stood in the center of her living room, the weapon heavy and foreign in her grip. "Go away!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "I'm calling the police!" "Amelia, open the door." The voice was not high and frantic like Brandon's. It was deep, resonant, and calm. The knife lowered an inch. She crept to the peephole. Alessio stood in the hallway. He was wearing a charcoal suit, immaculate as always, contrasting sharply with the peeling paint of her corridor. He looked out of place, like a panther pacing in a kennel. She undid the locks with trembling fingers and opened the door a crack, keeping the chain engaged. "What are you doing here? How do you know where I live?" "We established that I know things," Alessio said. He looked down at the slice of her face visible through the gap. Then his eyes dropped to the glimmer of steel in her hand. "You can put the knife down. If I wanted to hurt you, I would not have knocked." "That's not comforting," she snapped, though the adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving her exhausted. "Open the door. Amelia, we need to talk." "I'm not—" "Brandon was here last night," Alessio interrupted, his voice dropping an octave. "He was coming up the stairs. My men stopped him." Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. The car door she had heard, the silence that followed. She closed the door, slid the chain off, and opened it fully. Alessio stepped inside. He seemed to fill the small space, his presence absorbing the oxygen. He looked around the modest apartment, the stack of books, the dying plant on the sill, the suitcase half-packed in the corner. "You had men watching me?" she asked, anger warring with a humiliating sense of relief. "Yes, you have no right. I have the ability," he corrected gently, and clearly, the necessity. "The police did nothing, did they?" She turned away, placing the knife back on the counter with a clatter. "They said it wasn't a crime yet. It is always a crime to hunt a woman," Alessio said. He moved closer, but stopped a respectful distance away. "He will come back. My men scared him off, but obsession is a powerful drug. He will realize they were just hired muscle. He will think he can outsmart them. You are not safe here. I can't just leave. This is my home." "This is a trap," Alessio said. "Come with me." "To where? Your house?" She laughed, a brittle sound. "So I can trade one controlling man for another? I don't know you, Alessio. I don't know what you do. But I know men like you don't just help strangers for free." Alessio's expression shifted. The mask of the stoic businessman slipped, revealing something raw underneath. "You think I am like him?" "I think all men are like him until they prove otherwise," she whispered. The words hung in the air, heavy with history. Suddenly, she wasn't in her kitchen with Alessio. She was back in Brandon's living room 3 months ago. Flashback. "You're wearing that?" Brandon asked, gesturing to the red dress she had bought for her birthday. He didn't raise his voice. He never did, not at first. He just looked at her with a disappointment that felt like a physical weight. "I thought it looked nice," Amelia said, her smile faltering. "It looks desperate." He sighed, picking at a piece of lint on his shirt. "It makes you look like you're trying too hard to get attention. Is that what you want, for other men to stare at you like you're a piece of meat?" "No, I'm just trying to protect you. Em, you don't see how people look at you. Your friends laugh about it behind your back. Sarah told me she thinks you're becoming a bit much." He walked over and placed his hands on her shoulders. Heavy, restricting. "Go change. Put on the black sweater." "The one I like. You look so much classier in that. Do it for me?" She had gone to the bedroom and changed. She had burned the red dress the next day. End flashback. Amelia blinked, the memory receding. She found Alessio watching her, his dark eyes filled with a profound, terrifying understanding. "I am not him," Alessio said softly. "I do not want to control you. Amelia, I want to make sure you are alive to make your own choices. Come to my place. One night, just until we can figure out a permanent solution. I have a guest room. There are locks on the inside. You will have the key." She looked at the dark circles under her eyes in the hallway mirror. She looked at the door that felt like paper. She was so tired of being afraid. "One night," she said. Alessio nodded. One night. His penthouse was a world away from her life. It sat atop a steel spire in the center of the city, enclosed in glass that overlooked the glittering skyline. It was beautiful, sleek, and utterly silent. Amelia stood in the center of the living room, clutching her overnight bag. "It's big. It is quiet," Alessio said. He had removed his jacket and rolled up the sleeves of his white dress shirt, revealing forearms corded with muscle and a faint scar running down his left wrist. "Are you hungry?" "I couldn't eat." "You will eat." He walked into the kitchen. It wasn't a command. It was a statement of fact. To her surprise, he didn't order food. He cooked. She sat on a high stool at the marble island, watching him chop vegetables with precise, rhythmic movements. There was something hypnotic about it, a man who commanded fear in others, creating something nourishing. He made a simple pasta dish, rich with garlic and tomato. He poured 2 glasses of dark red wine. They ate on the balcony, the city wind blocked by glass panels. The lights of the world spread out below them like spilled diamonds. The wine loosened the knot in her chest. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again. "Really?" Alessio swirled his glass. "My father," he began, staring out at the horizon, was a man who believed that strength was the only currency. He taught me that to care for something was to create a weakness. Amelia watched him. "He sounds terrible." "He was effective. He built an empire." Alessio turned to her. "But he was empty. I grew up surrounded by violence. I learned it before I learned to read. I know how to break a man in 3 places before he hits the ground, but I never learned how to stop." He took a sip of wine. "When I saw you in that bar, you were terrified, but you were brave. You grabbed a stranger to save yourself. You fought back against the fear. It woke something up in me. I suppose I wanted to see if I could use my hands for something other than breaking." Amelia felt a lump in her throat. She set her glass down. "Brandon made me feel like I was nothing, like I was a child who couldn't survive without him. He stripped away my friends, my confidence, piece by piece until I didn't recognize myself. He is a weak man," Alessio said, his voice vibrating with suppressed lethality. "He breaks things to feel tall. I will not let him break you." The air between them shifted. It was no longer just gratitude and protection. It was a magnetic pull, born of shared scars. Alessio stood up and extended a hand. "Come, it is late." Amelia took his hand. She expected him to lead her to the guest room. Instead, he paused, looking down at her, the city lights reflected in his eyes. "You're shaking," he whispered. "I'm not scared." She lied. "You are, but you are here anyway." He lifted his hand and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her cheek. His skin was rough, calloused, but his touch was lighter than a feather. It was a question. Amelia answered it by stepping closer. She placed her hand on his chest, over his heart. It beat slow and steady, a heavy drum against her palm. "I don't want to be alone tonight," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Alessio didn't smile. He looked at her with a reverence that made her knees weak. He leaned down and kissed her. It wasn't the performance from the bar, nor the claiming from the cafe. This was soft. It was a tasting. He kissed her as if she were made of glass, as if one wrong move would shatter her. He led her not to the guest room, but to the massive master bedroom. The lights were dim. He sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her to stand between his knees. He didn't undress her. He waited. Amelia reached for his shirt buttons. Her fingers fumbled. He didn't help. He let her set the pace. When the shirt fell away, she traced the scars on his torso, mapping the violence he had survived. "Alessio," she whispered. He pulled her down to him. The lovemaking that followed was a slow, agonizingly sweet discovery. There was no rush, no demand. When his hands moved over her skin, he watched her face, looking for any sign of hesitation, any flinch of fear. When she tensed, momentarily trapped by a memory of Brandon's selfish touch. Alessio stopped instantly. He held her, murmuring low Italian words against her neck until her breathing steadied, until she realized she was safe. He let her lead. He let her find her rhythm. For the first time in years, Amelia felt her body belonged to her. She wasn't a possession to be used, she was a partner. Every touch from him was a form of worship. When the release finally came, it was emotional as much as physical, a purging of the fear she had carried for so long. Later, the room was silent. Amelia lay with her head on Alessio's chest, his arm draped heavily over her waist, holding her close. The sheets were tangled around their legs. She listened to the steady rhythm of his breathing, the solid, unshakable reality of him. For the first time in 6 months, she didn't check the door. She didn't look at her phone. She closed her eyes and let the darkness take her, knowing that nothing could get past the man holding her. She slept. But Alessio did not. He lay awake in the gloom, staring at the ceiling. His hand moved idly up and down her arm, a soothing, possessive rhythm. He felt the fragility of her, the trust she had placed in him. It terrified him more than any gun pointed at his head ever had. He thought of Brandon. He thought of the Veretti family encroaching on his territory downtown. He thought of the violent world he lived in, a world of blood and retribution. He looked down at the woman sleeping in his arms. She was at peace. She was light. And he was dragging her into the dark. "I will burn the world down before I let anything touch you," he vowed silently, the promise settling into his bones like lead. "Even if the thing I have to protect you from is me." The morning sun hit the floor-to-ceiling glass of the penthouse bedroom, turning the room into a cage of gold and light. Amelia sat on the edge of the bed, pulling her socks on. Her movements were stiff, decisive, a stark contrast to the fluidity of the night before. Alessio stood by the window, wearing only sweatpants, a mug of coffee in his hand. He watched her reflection in the glass. The city of New York sprawled out below them, waking up, noisy and oblivious. "You do not have to go," he said. His voice was rough with sleep, lacking the polished edge it carried in the business world. Amelia paused, her hands resting on her knees, the memory of his skin against hers, the way he had held her through the nightmares, was a warm weight in her chest. It would be so easy to stay, to let him lock the world out, but the ease of it terrified her. It felt like slipping into a warm bath and falling asleep, only to wake up drowning. "I do have to go," she said, turning to face him. "I have a job. I have rent. I have a life. Alessio, if I stay here, hiding in your tower, Brandon wins. He wanted to make me small, to make me afraid of the world. If I stop living, he gets what he wants." Alessio turned. His expression was unreadable, but his jaw was tight. "There is a difference between hiding and being safe. Not for me. Not right now." She stood up, smoothing down her rumpled clothes from the day before. "I need to know that I can walk down the street. I need to know that I own my own life." He set the mug down on the marble sill with a sharp click. He walked over to her, stopping just inches away. He didn't touch her, but the heat radiating from him was a physical force. "You are stubborn," he murmured, and there was a grudging respect in the tone. "I had to learn to be. My driver is downstairs. He will take you to work. I'll take the subway." Alessio's eyes narrowed. Amelia. The subway. Alessio. Like a normal person. She slung her bag over her shoulder. "Thank you. For last night. For everything, but I need to do this." He held her gaze for a long moment. A silent battle of wills. Finally, he nodded once. "Go. But keep your phone on. If you call, I answer. Always." "I know," she said softly. She walked out the door before she could change her mind. The corner red smelled of old paper, vanilla and dust, a scent that usually grounded her. Today. However, the bookstore felt less like a sanctuary and more like a fishbowl. Amelia shelved new arrivals in the fiction section, her spine prickling every time the door chimed. Every shadow looked like Brandon. Every loud voice made her flinch. She forced herself to breathe, to focus on the alphabetizing, on the mundane tasks of a normal life. Around 2 p.m, the bell chimed. 2 men walked in. They were not readers. Amelia knew the type of people who came here. Students with heavy backpacks, elderly women looking for mysteries, tired office workers seeking an escape. These men were different. They wore leather jackets that creaked, and they moved with a heavy, purposeful swagger. They didn't look at the books, they looked at the layout of the store. Amelia froze behind a stack of hardcovers. One of the men, the taller of the two with a shaved head, walked up to the counter where her coworker, Chloe, was texting. "We're looking for a girl," the man said. His voice was loud, unbothered. "Works here, dark hair, pretty, goes by Amelia." Chloe looked up, startled. I think she's on break." Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. These weren't Alessio's men. Alessio's men wore suits. They blended in. They called her Ma'am or Miss Amelia. These men felt reckless. They felt like street thugs. "Is that right?" The man leaned over the counter. "Well, tell her she's got friends looking out for her. Tell her she's becoming popular." The second man laughed, a dry, ugly sound, and scanned the aisles. His gaze swept over the fiction section. Amelia ducked lower, her breath caught in her throat. "Let's go," the first man said. "We got eyes on the place." They turned and walked out, the bell chiming cheerfully behind them. Amelia sank to the floor, her legs trembling. It wasn't Brandon. Brandon didn't have friends like that. This was something else, something worse. Across the street, inside a parked sedan, the bald man picked up his phone. "It's confirmed," he said to the receiver. "The Moretti boss is keeping her close. We saw his driver drop her off 2 blocks away this morning. She's the weak point." A voice on the other end crackled, cold and distorted. "Good. Don't touch her yet. Let him get comfortable. When we strike, I want him to feel it rip." By the time evening came, Amelia was vibrating with anxiety. She hadn't called Alessio. She told herself she was overreacting, that maybe they were just debt collectors looking for someone else, or maybe Brandon had hired lowlives. Calling Alessio felt like admitting defeat, like pulling the ripcord on her independence less than 12 hours after reclaiming it. "You need a drink," Chloe said, watching Amelia jump at the sound of the espresso machine. "Come to the gallery opening with me tonight. Free wine, bad art, and absolutely no psychos allowed." "I don't know. Chloe, please. I don't want to go alone. And you look like you're about to snap. It'll be good for you. Normal. The word was a lure she couldn't resist. "Okay," Amelia said. "Let's go." The gallery was in Chelsea, a stark white space filled with people wearing black turtlenecks and holding flutes of cheap champagne. The art was aggressive, splashes of red and black on massive canvases. It felt chaotic, mirroring the noise in Amelia's head. She stuck close to Chloe, sipping her wine, trying to pretend she was just a 24-year-old woman on a night out, but she couldn't stop watching the door. She couldn't stop checking the exits. Half an hour in, the atmosphere in the room shifted. It was subtle at first, a quieting conversation near the entrance. Heads turning. Amelia looked over the rim of her glass and nearly choked. Alessio was walking through the crowd. He was not wearing a suit tonight. He wore dark jeans and a black leather jacket over a white t-shirt. It was casual, but on him. It looked like armor. He moved through the gallery with a prowling grace that made the art crowd part like the Red Sea. He didn't look at the paintings. He looked straight at her. "Oh my God," Chloe whispered, nudging Amelia. "Who is that? And why is he looking at you like he wants to eat you?" Amelia set her glass down on a passing tray. "I'll be right back." She met him in the hallway leading to the restrooms, away from the prying eyes of the crowd. The corridor was narrow, lit by recessed lighting that cast long shadows. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low and furious. Alessio leaned against the wall, crossing his arms. "I enjoy the arts. Don't give me that. You're following me. I am keeping an eye on you," he corrected. "There is a difference." "Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it feels like stalking. I told you I needed space. Alessio, I told you I needed to handle things myself." "You cannot handle this," he said, his voice dropping, losing its casual veneer. "I had reports of 2 men at your bookstore today. Men who do not belong there." Amelia went cold. "You knew?" "I know everything that happens around you. Those men are not Brandon. They are wolves, Amelia. And you are walking around like a lamb in a petting zoo." "So what? You just follow me forever? You stand outside my job, my apartment, my dates." She stepped closer, poking him in the chest. "I traded one cage for another. That's what this is." Alessio caught her finger. His hand was warm, his grip firm but not painful. He pulled her in until their bodies were almost touching. "You think this is a cage?" he growled softly. "A cage keeps you in. I am keeping them out." "It feels the same," she cried, though the fight was leaking out of her, replaced by the confusing, overwhelming magnetic pull of him. "I don't want to be someone's property, Alessio. I don't want to be kept." "You are not property," he said, his eyes searching hers, dark and intense. "You are the only thing in this city that is real, and I am terrified that if I look away for 1 second, you will be gone." The vulnerability in his voice, usually so commanding, stunned her. She stared up at him, seeing the fear behind the rage. He wasn't trying to control her because he owned her. He was trying to control the chaos because he cared. "I'm not going anywhere," she whispered. "Prove it," he breathed. He didn't wait for an answer. He dipped his head and kissed her. It wasn't the gentle, healing kiss of the night before. This was desperate. It was frustration and fear and raw attraction colliding in the narrow hallway. His hands tangled in her hair, tilting her head back, deepening the contact until she was breathless. She kissed him back with equal force, her hands bunching in his leather jacket, anchoring herself to him. It was an argument and a reconciliation all at once. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Alessio rested his forehead against hers. "Let me drive you home," he said. "Please." She closed her eyes, leaning into him. "Okay, take me home." The ride to her apartment was quiet, his hand resting on her knee the entire time, a heavy, comforting weight. When the car pulled up to her curb, the street was dark. "I will wait until you are inside," Alessio said. "You don't have to." "I will wait." Amelia didn't argue. She ran up the steps to the front door of her building, unlocked it, and waved at the tinted window of the sedan. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs, fishing for her keys. She reached her door and stopped. The wood around the lock was splintered. The door was standing open 2 inches, revealing a slice of darkness inside. Her stomach dropped to the floor. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." She pushed the door open with a trembling hand. The apartment had been destroyed. It wasn't just robbed, it was violated. Her books were swept off the shelves, pages torn out and scattered like confetti. The sofa cushions were slashed. Her small television was smashed on the floor. But it was the bedroom that broke her. She walked in, her hand over her mouth to stifle a scream. Her dresser drawers had been pulled out and overturned. Her underwear, her clothes, were strewn everywhere. And on the mirror, taped up with cruel precision, were photos of her, snapshots from old birthday parties, pictures with friends all torn in half. Her face had been ripped out of every single one. It was a message. "You are broken. You are nothing." Amelia backed out of the room, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers shaking so badly she dropped it twice before dialing the only number that mattered. "Amelia!" Alessio's voice was instant. "He came," she sobbed, sliding down the wall to the floor amidst the wreckage of her life. "He was here. Everything is gone. I am coming up." He didn't wait for the buzzer. 30 seconds later, she heard heavy boots taking the stairs 3 at a time. Alessio burst through the doorway. He had a gun in his hand, held low against his leg, his eyes scanning the room with lethal precision. When he saw the empty apartment, he holstered the weapon instantly, but the violence in his demeanor didn't fade. He saw her sitting on the floor, hugging her knees, surrounded by the debris. "Did he touch you?" Alessio asked, his voice terrifyingly quiet. He knelt beside her, his hands hovering, checking for injuries. "Amelia, look at me. Are you hurt?" "No," she choked out. "I wasn't here, but he looks—" She pointed toward the bedroom. Alessio stood and walked into the bedroom. He was gone for 10 seconds. When he came back, his face was a mask of stone, but his eyes were burning with a cold, white-hot fury. "Brandon." He spat the name like a curse. "He waited until my men were distracted with the gallery." He slipped past. "He ripped my face out," Amelia whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He went through my things, my underwear. He touched everything. He is a dead man," Alessio vowed. "I don't care about the police. I don't care about the rules. Tonight," he ends. "Alessio, no!" she cried, reaching for his hand. "Don't leave me here." The anger in his face fractured, revealing the pain beneath. He scooped her up into his arms as if she weighed nothing. "I am not leaving you," he said firmly. "We are going. You are never stepping foot in this place again." He carried her down the stairs, past the confused neighbors peering out their doors, and into the back of his car. "Home," he told the driver. "Now." The ride back to the penthouse was a blur of city lights and silent tears. Amelia curled into Alessio's side, burying her face in his jacket, trying to block out the image of her violated sanctuary. When they arrived, he didn't let her walk. He carried her into the elevator, up to the sky, and into the master bedroom. He set her down on the bed, the same bed she had left that morning thinking she could conquer the world. Now, she felt shattered. "I'm sorry," she wept, her hands covering her face. "I'm so sorry." "You were right. I couldn't handle it. I'm weak." Alessio pulled her hands away from her face. He sat on the edge of the bed and framed her face with his palms, forcing her to look at him. "You are not weak," he said fiercely. "You are fighting a war you did not choose. A soldier who is ambushed is not weak. They are just outnumbered, but you are not outnumbered anymore." He pulled her into his chest, wrapping his arms around her so tightly it felt like he was trying to fuse her broken pieces back together. She clung to him, her tears soaking his shirt. She cried for the loss of her home, for the violation of her privacy, and for the terrifying realization that she had fallen in love with the only man dangerous enough to keep her safe. He held her until the sobbing stopped, until her breathing hitched into a steady rhythm. "Make it go away," she whispered against his neck. "Please, Alessio, just make me forget." He pulled back, his eyes searching hers. He saw the desperation there, the need to replace the feeling of violation with something else, something real, something claiming. "I will erase him," Alessio swore. "I will erase every memory of him until the only thing you know is me." He kissed her then, and it was not gentle. It was a collision. They moved together with a frantic urgency. Clothes were discarded carelessly, left in a pile on the floor. When his skin touched hers, it was electric. He didn't move with the slow reverence of the night before. Tonight, he was fierce. He was recovering her body from the ghost of the man who had violated her space. "You are mine," he growled against her skin, his hands mapping every inch of her. "You are here. You are safe. You are mine. Yours," she gasped, arching into him. "I'm yours?" Lovemaking was a storm. It was sweat and heat and whispered promises in the dark. It was an exorcism of fear. Amelia met his intensity with her own, clawing at his back, needing to feel the reality of him, the strength that stood between her and the abyss. When the crest finally came, it left them both shattered and breathless, tangled together in the sheets. Alessio collapsed beside her, pulling her immediately into his arms, refusing to let even an inch of space separate them. He kissed her damp forehead, her temple, her shoulder. "He will never come near you again," Alessio whispered into the darkness. Amelia closed her eyes, listening to the beat of his heart. She believed him. But deep down, a cold sliver of doubt remained. The men in the bookstore? The calculated timing. It felt too precise for Brandon. It felt like a game of chess she didn't know she was playing. But tonight, in the fortress of the penthouse, she let herself believe the lie. She was safe. She was loved. And she was no longer running. Living in Alessio's penthouse was like living in the sky. The first week, Amelia felt suspended, floating in a silent, climate-controlled world high above the city's grime. She had a closet filled with clothes she hadn't bought, ate food she hadn't cooked, and traveled in cars she hadn't summoned. She was, by every conceivable measure, safe. And she had never been more afraid. This fear was different from the sharp, coppery terror Brandon had inspired, this was a slow, creeping dread of erasure. She had escaped a man who controlled her through insults and isolation. She had fallen into the arms of a man who controlled her with silk and security. The cage was gilded now, but the bars felt just as real. She would watch him in the mornings, standing on the balcony, already on the phone, his voice a low, clipped rhythm of Italian and English. He spoke of shipments, territories, and, increasingly, of the Verettis. He was a king in his element, and she was a curiosity he kept in his castle. Then he would hang up, turn to her, and the king would vanish. The hardness in his eyes would melt, replaced by a tenderness that was almost jarring. "You slept," he would murmur, touching her cheek as if checking to see if she were real. "I did," she would reply, her voice thick. "Good." He would kiss her forehead, a gesture of profound, gentle possession. "Luca is driving you to the bookstore today. I want you back by 5. His business life was bleeding tension into their sanctuary. The Veretti family, a rival faction from the old country, was challenging his hold on the waterfront. Alessio grew quieter, his shoulders tighter, his nights longer. He spent more time in his study, the heavy oak doors closed, his voice a low rumble she couldn't quite decipher. The shift happened on a Tuesday. Emilia was reading in the living room when Alessio strode in from the elevator, his face a mask of granite. He didn't see her. He went straight to the bar and poured 3 fingers of whiskey, downing it in one pull. "Alessio, what is it? What's wrong?" He turned, and his eyes were voids. "They hit Luca." "Luca, you're your driver?" "He's more than a driver. He's family." Alessio slammed the glass down so hard she flinched. "It was an ambush. They waited for him outside his mother's house." "Oh my God, he's alive, for now, but they left a message." He walked past her into his study, leaving the door ajar. Emilia followed, hovering at the threshold. He was on the phone, his back to her, but she heard every lethal word. "The Verettis are dead men. All of them. I don't care about the risk. I want no, it wasn't a warning shot." He paused, listening, his entire body rigid. "They used her name," he said, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "They sent a message to Luca's phone with a picture of the bookstore. They said, 'Tell your boss to watch his new girl.' They knew. They knew where she worked." Emilia's blood ran cold. She was not just a protected civilian. She was a target. Alessio hung up and turned slowly, seeing her standing there. Pale and trembling, the rage in his eyes was instantly banked, replaced by a fierce, terrifying protectiveness. "You are not leaving this penthouse," he said, his voice quiet, final. "What?" "I am doubling the details. There will be a man outside this door, and one in the elevator. You will not go to the bookstore. You will not go anywhere. Not until this is finished." The floor seemed to drop out from under her. It wasn't the danger that made her snap. It was the command. It was the echo of Brandon's voice. "You can't see your friends. It's safer if you just stay home with me." "No," Emilia said, her voice shaking. "Emilia, this is not a discussion. These are not street thugs. These are killers. They see you as a weapon to use against me." "And what do you see me as?" she shot back, the words laced with a sudden, bitter fury. "Your prized possession? Something to lock up in your tower until you feel like playing with it?" Alessio stiffened. "That is not what this is, isn't it? I have no key. I have no money that I've earned. I have no life that is mine. I am just here, on your terms, a prisoner. I am keeping you safe," he roared, the sound echoing in the massive room. "You are keeping me caged," she screamed back, tears of frustration stinging her eyes. "I ran from a man who wanted to control my every move. I kissed a stranger in a bar to escape that control, not to find a more expensive version of it." The words hit him like a physical blow. The rage in his face fractured, replaced by a look of stunned, profound hurt. He stared at her, breathing heavily, as if he'd never truly seen her before. He walked past her and stared out the window for a full minute. The silence was absolute. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "I have never cared for someone like this." He didn't turn around. "In my world, you protect what is yours. You lock it down. You build walls. It is the only way I know." He turned to face her, and the humility in his expression took her breath away. "I apologize," he said, the words sounding foreign on his tongue. "I do not know how to do this. I do not know how to protect you without caging you, but I am learning." He backed off. He didn't rescind the order for guards, but the suffocating intensity lifted. Later that night, they sat in silence. The argument hung between them like a bruise. Alessio got up, went to his study, and returned. He walked over to her and held out his hand. In his palm sat a single, heavy, antique-style key. "What is this?" she whispered. "It's the key to the private elevator. It's the key to the front door. It's the key to this penthouse." He closed her fingers around the metal. It was warm from his grip. "You are not a prisoner, Amelia," he said, his voice thick with an emotion she couldn't name. "You are my home." The gesture was a truce, and for Amelia, it was oxygen. Holding that key in her pocket, she felt a sliver of her old self return. She wasn't his, she was hers, and she needed to reclaim the life that Brandon, and now Alessio's world, had tried to take from her. 2 days later, she made a call she hadn't made in almost a year. "Sarah? Em? Oh my God, Em, is that you? I've been so worried. I know, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Can I see you?" They met at a bright, crowded coffee shop in Midtown, a place with floor-to-ceiling windows and zero shadows. Alessio had not wanted her to go. He had compromised. She could go for 1 hour. His men, the discreet ones, in suits, not leather, would be outside. When Sarah saw her, she burst into tears and threw her arms around her. I thought you were gone." "I got out, Sarah," Amelia whispered, holding her friend tightly, the simple, normal contact feeling like a miracle. "I got out, but I'm in something else now. It's complicated." They talked for an hour. Amelia explained as much as she could, painting Alessio as a security consultant who was helping her with a stalker. Sarah didn't look convinced, her eyes lingering on the expensive, unfamiliar watch on Amelia's wrist, but she didn't press. Just having her friend back was enough. "You look good, Em," Sarah said, squeezing her hand. "You look strong. Whatever you're doing, just be safe." The meeting was like water in a desert. Amelia left the coffee shop feeling lighter, feeling more like herself than she had in months. She waved goodbye to Sarah and began walking the 2 blocks to where Alessio's driver was waiting. She was so high on the feeling of normalcy that she didn't see the figure watching from the alley across the street. Brandon saw it all. He saw Amelia, looking radiant and healthy. He saw her hug another woman. He saw the black sedan idling at the corner. He saw the men in suits watching her. His obsession, which had been simmering in fear since his encounter with Alessio's men, boiled over into a psychotic rage. She wasn't just surviving without him. She was thriving. Amelia took a shortcut through an alley she used to take every day, a narrow passage that cut between a bakery and a law office. Halfway through, a figure stepped out from behind a dumpster, blocking her path. "Amelia!" Her heart stopped. Brandon, he looked terrible. He was thin, his eyes bloodshot and crazed, his clothes rumpled. "Brandon," she said, her voice firm, the fear instantly replaced by a cold anger. "Get out of my way!" "You think you're too good for me now?" he sneered, advancing on her. "With your new car, your new rich boyfriend? You think he's better than me?" "Everyone is better than you," she said, backing away. "You're just a slut, Amelia. You ran right from my bed to his." He lunged, grabbing her wrist. "You're coming with me. We're going to talk. We're going to fix this." "Let go of me," she screamed, yanking her arm, but his grip was like iron. He shoved her hard against the brick wall. The air rushed out of her lungs before he could raise a hand, before she could even scream again. 2 shadows detached themselves from the mouth of the alley. "Let her go!" Brandon froze. It was the men in suits. They moved with a silent, terrifying efficiency. They didn't run. They just arrived. "This is none of your business," Brandon snarled, pulling Amelia in front of him like a shield. "She is our only business," the first man said. "This is your final warning." "Or what?" A 3rd shadow fell over the alley. A black sedan had pulled up to the entrance, blocking the light. Alessio stepped out of the car. He wasn't wearing a jacket. He was just in a black button-down, sleeves rolled up, and he looked like death itself. He walked calmly down the alley. Brandon's grip on Amelia loosened. "Alessio," she breathed, a sob of relief. Alessio didn't look at her. His eyes were fixed on Brandon. He stopped 5 feet away. "You put your hands on her," Alessio said. It was not a question. It was a death sentence. "She's my girlfriend," Brandon yelled, his voice cracking with fear. Alessio put his hand on Amelia's shoulder and gently moved her behind him, shielding her with his body. He stepped toward Brandon until they were chest to chest. Alessio was taller, broader, and anchored in a way Brandon had never been. "You will never call her again," Alessio said, his voice a whisper, but it carried more menace than a shout. "You will not text her. You will not walk on her street. You will not say her name. If you breathe the same air as her again, you will disappear. I will not have to look for you, because no one will ever find you." He didn't touch him. He just looked at him. Brandon, faced with an apex predator, completely dissolved. He began to shake. "I'm okay. Okay, man. Just okay. Go," Alessio said. Brandon scrambled past him, slipping on a garbage bag, and ran out of the alley, disappearing into the midday crowd. Amelia sagged against Alessio, her legs giving out. He caught her, his arms wrapping around her like steel bands. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "You're safe." He's gone. That night, the penthouse felt different. It felt like a true home. Amelia sat on the sofa, curled up, a glass of brandy in her hands. Alessio was standing by the window. The image of him in the alley burned into her mind. He had faced down her monster. "I'm falling for you, Alessio," she said to the glass. He turned, his face serious. "I know." "No," she said, standing up and walking over to him. "You don't understand. It's not gratitude. It's not because you're protecting me. I see you, and I'm falling in love with you." The words hung in the air, terrifying and true. He stepped close, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. His thumb stroked her skin. "You are not falling, mia cara," he whispered, his voice rough. "You have already landed. You already belong to me." He kissed her, and it was a vow. The next day, Amelia woke up feeling a strange, new confidence. Brandon was gone, truly gone. The Veretti threat was Alessio's world, not hers. She felt almost normal. Alessio was locked in his study, on a call that had been going on for 2 hours. She needed air, just to walk, just to feel the sun on her face. She grabbed the key. "I'm just going to the corner store," she told the guard by the elevator. "I'll be back in 10 minutes. The guard, new and clearly nervous about her, nodded. "Ma'am, Mr." Moretti said. "Mr. Moretti gave me a key," she said, holding it up. "I'll be fine." She went down the elevator, walked through the pristine lobby, and out onto the sun-drenched street, the black town car. Alessio's personal car was idling at the curb as always. The driver, a man she didn't recognize, wasn't inside, and he was probably grabbing a coffee. She started to walk past the car, heading for the crosswalk. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. It was Alessio. "Did you leave the building?" His voice was sharp. "I was just going to the store," she said, smiling. "I'll be right back." "Stop, where are you, exactly?" "I'm on the sidewalk. I'm right by your car." A split second of dead silence. Then his voice. Not a shout, but a primal roar that ripped through the phone. "Get away from the car! Amelia, get away from the car now!" She froze, confused by the violence in his tone. "What? Why? Now!" She stumbled backward, her eyes scanning the vehicle. And then she saw it. Taped to the chassis, just behind the front passenger side wheel, was a small, dark box. A tiny red light blinked once. She didn't have time to scream. She threw herself backward, falling to the hard pavement as the world erupted in a blinding flash of white light and a sound that tore the sky in two. The force of the explosion picked her up and slammed her against the granite wall of the building. Windows for half a block shattered, raining glass down onto the street. Amelia lay on the ground, her ears ringing, the smell of fire and gasoline filling her lungs. She had narrowly, miraculously, escaped. The Verettis hadn't been aiming for her. They had been aiming for Alessio, and they had just declared war. The ringing in Emilia's ears was a solid, high-pitched wall of sound. Smoke and pulverized glass filled the air, acrid and suffocating. She was on the pavement, her hip aching from the impact, but she was alive. Then, through the ringing came a sound, a primal scream of her name. "Emilia!" Alessio burst from the building's lobby, moving faster than she had ever seen a man move. His guards were right behind him, fanning out, guns drawn, creating a perimeter. But Alessio only had eyes for her. He reached her in 3 strides, dropping to his knees on the broken glass, his hands hovering over her, terrified to touch her. "Are you hurt?" "Dimmy dove. Tell me where." "I don't think so." She coughed, the smoke burning her throat. "My hip, I just fell." He didn't wait. His hands were instantly gentle but firm, checking her ribs, her head. His touch clinical and desperate, finding no blood. He slid one arm under her back and the other under her knees, lifting her against his chest. "She's okay," he roared to his men, his voice vibrating with a lethal, controlled fury. "Lock it down, now. Find out who. I want a name. I want a location. I want them finished by midnight." He carried her back into the penthouse, the private elevator bypassing all floors. The doors opened, and he didn't set her down until he was in the center of the living room. Placing her on the soft leather sofa, the man who had apologized for being controlling was gone. In his place was the head of the Moretti crime family. For the next 2 hours, the penthouse was a command center. Men in dark suits came and went, speaking in low, urgent Italian. Alessio stood at the window, a phone pressed to his ear, his back to her. He was no longer her protector. He was a general waging a war. "I don't care what it costs," he said, his voice a low growl of ice. "Find the one who gave the order, the Verettis, all of them. Burn their warehouses, seize their shipments, find their safe houses. I want them on their knees. I want them ruined." He hung up and turned to her. Emilia had been sitting there, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, a glass of water untouched on the table. The shock had receded, replaced by a cold, dreadful understanding. "Alessio, don't," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "They tried to kill you," he stated, as if it were the only fact in the world. "They tried to kill you," she corrected, standing up, her hip twinging in protest. "I was just collateral damage. Alessio, you can't just declare war. People will die. This will escalate until someone is dead. Maybe you." He walked over to her, his face a mask of terrible calm. "They came for you. Emilia. They came for your car. They didn't know I was there." "It does not matter," he said, his voice flat. "They brought this violence to your feet. They put their hands on what is mine. They put you in danger. For that, there is no negotiation. There is only an end." Emilia looked at him, at the cold finality in his eyes, and she finally understood. This was his world. This was the man she had kissed in the bar, not a protector, but a predator. And she had just become his reason to hunt. "Please," she begged, her hands clutching the front of his shirt. "Please, let the police handle it. Let's just go away. We can go somewhere else. This life, this bloodshed, will destroy you." He covered her hands with his own. "You cannot handle bloodshed," he said. It wasn't a question. "No," she wept, her forehead falling against his chest. "I can't. I love you, Alessio. I'm in love with you, but I can't watch you become a monster for me." He held her head, his grip firm, tilting her chin up so she was forced to look at him. His dark eyes were filled with a sadness that was older than she was. "You think this is a choice?" he whispered. "You think love is a quiet room? You think it is a safe house? Love doesn't exist without war. Mia cara. It is the most brutal war of all." He kissed her. A deep, bruising kiss that tasted of anger and possession. "They came for you," he repeated against her lips. "And you are my war now." The lockdown was absolute. She was not allowed near the windows. The glass, which had once offered a view of the world, was now a liability. Guards stood by the elevator. Food was brought in. The penthouse. Once her home was now the fortress Alessio had always intended it to be. For 3 days, she lived in the eye of a storm. She heard a wordless, one-sided war through Alessio's phone calls, warehouses burning on the docks, a shipment rerouted, 2 of the Veretti family's men detained. Alessio was distant, consumed by the mechanics of his revenge. He was calculated, more dangerous than she had ever seen him. He slept in 2-hour increments, often in his study, when he did come to bed. He held her with a crushing intensity, as if she were the only thing anchoring him to the earth. On the 4th day, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She looked at it, surprised. She'd barely spoken to anyone. It was a text from an unknown number. Her blood went cold. She opened it. "He's just like me. M. He just has more money." She knew instantly. It was Brandon. "You think this is love? He's got you in a cage, just like you said he would." Did you ever wonder how he always knew where you were? How did he, coincidentally, find you at that cafe? He was watching you before I ever lost you. He's just better at it. He's using me, using my stalking, to keep you scared, to keep you close. Ask him. Ask him when he really started following you. Amelia stared at the words, her hands shaking. It was a lie. It had to be a lie. Brandon was a desperate, pathetic man. But how had Alessio found her at the cafe? How did he know her real name after she had lied? How did he know where she lived? The doubt, once planted, was a fast-growing poison. It tapped into every fear she'd ever had. The fear of being manipulated. The fear of being a pawn in a man's game. The fear of trading one monster for another. She stood up from the bed, the text message burning on the screen, and walked into the study. Alessio was at his desk, a map of the city's shipping lanes spread out before him. He looked up when she entered, his eyes tired but sharpening when he saw her expression. "What is it? Are you all right?" "When did you start following me?" she asked, her voice flat. He stiffened. "We've discussed this. I had my men watch your apartment after you ran from the bar. It was necessary." "No," she said, holding up the phone. "When did you really start?" "Brandon, he just sent me a message. He says you were watching me before that you found me at the cafe on purpose, that you used him to scare me into your arms, into this penthouse." Alessio's face went pale. He stood up slowly. "The man is a psychotic liar. You cannot believe a word he says." "He said to ask you," she cried, the tears she had held back finally breaking free. "So I'm asking." "Did you know who I was before I kissed you in that bar?" "No," Alessio said firmly. "Then how did you find me at that cafe 2 days later? How did you know my name? How did you know where I lived? Tell me." Alessio's jaw tightened. He looked away, and in that one movement she had her answer. "I ran your face through a database," he admitted, his voice low. "The night at the bar, after you left, I had my men identify you. I found your apartment. I found your workplace. Yes, I knew where you would be. The cafe was not a coincidence." Amelia felt the floor drop out from under her. It wasn't just protection. It was surveillance. From the very first night, he had lied to her. He had let her believe it was a chance encounter. "So you sat there," she whispered, the pieces clicking into place with a horrifying clarity. "You sat there, and you waited for me. You let me believe I was having a normal day. You let me believe I was making a choice. I did it to protect you." He yelled, his control finally snapping. "You were in danger. I was not going to let a woman I just met disappear into the night to be brutalized by that animal." "So you became an animal," she screamed, shoving him in the chest. "You became the man in the shadows, the man who watches, the man who controls. You are just like him. You're just richer. Brandon was right." "Do not say that," Alessio growled, grabbing her arms. His grip was painfully tight. "I am nothing like him. I am keeping you alive." Amelia froze, her eyes wide, staring at the white-knuckled grip he had on her. He followed her gaze. He released her instantly, as if he'd been burned. He stepped back, his hands held up, his face a mask of horror. "Amelia, I would never—" But she was already backing away, her old trauma swallowing her whole. She saw Brandon's hand on her wrist. She saw Alessio's. They were the same. "I can't," she sobbed, turning and running from the room. "I can't. I have to go." "Amelia, wait! The Verettis are hunting you. You cannot walk out that door. They're hunting you," she shrieked from the bedroom, pulling on her shoes. "And I'd rather take my chances with them than stay in this cage with you." She grabbed her purse and the key he had given her. She ran to the elevator, jamming the key into the lock. "Amelia, please," he begged, following her, his voice breaking. "Don't do this. He's in your head. Don't let him win." The elevator doors opened. She stepped inside. "He already won," she whispered. "You both did." She pressed the button for the lobby. Alessio stood there, his arm outstretched, but he didn't move to stop her. He just watched her go, his face shattered. He let her leave. Amelia ran out of the building, past the confused guards and into the anonymous yellow of a taxi. She gave the driver Sarah's address, her entire body shaking. She spent the next 24 hours on Sarah's sofa, a ghost in a life that was no longer hers. Sarah was terrified, but she asked no questions, simply providing blankets, tea, and silence. Amelia stared at the ceiling, replaying every moment, the lie about the cafe, the surveillance, the way he had admitted it only when cornered. But then the other moments, the way he had held her after the explosion, the way he had faced down Brandon, the way he had tended to her wounds. No man had ever protected her like Alessio, but no man had ever terrified her so completely. Loving him was like holding a lit stick of dynamite, praying the fuse was long. She was starting to drift into a fitful sleep, the city's sirens a distant lullaby, when the sound of a car engine, too loud, too close, revved outside the window. Sarah's apartment was on the second floor. Amelia sat up. The sound came again, a heavy, rumbling engine. Then a sound she would never forget, the sharp, metallic pop-pop-pop of gunfire. Glass shattered in Sarah's living room. Bullets thudded into the wall above the sofa, exactly where Amelia had been lying seconds before. Plaster exploded into the air. Sarah screamed from the bedroom. Amelia was on the floor, crawling, her heart trying to escape her chest. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't a mistake. The car squealed away. She lay on the cheap rug, surrounded by plaster dust and broken glass, and she finally understood. She had been the target. They weren't trying to use her to get to Alessio. They were trying to eliminate her. Leaving the penthouse hadn't made her free. It had made her an easy target. "Amelia, are you okay?" Sarah was crying from the hallway. Amelia stood up on shaking legs. The war was not Alessio's. It was hers. They were hunting her. She didn't answer Sarah. She ran out the door, down the stairs and into the street, flagging down the first taxi she saw, her hand still shaking so hard she could barely open the door. "Where to, lady?" She gave him the address of the penthouse. The ride was a blur. She didn't cry. She was beyond tears. She was in a cold, clear place of absolute certainty. She had been running her whole life, from Brandon, from control, from violence. And now she was running back. Not to a cage, but to the only man who knew how to fight the monsters. She used the key. The elevator ride up felt like an eternity. The doors opened. The penthouse was dark, except for the glow of the city lights. Alessio was standing at the window, exactly where she had left him, a statue of black silk, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He hadn't moved. He turned slowly as the elevator chimed. He saw her. She was disheveled, covered in plaster dust, her eyes wide with a new, wild terror. He dropped the glass. It shattered on the marble floor. "Amelia," he breathed, the word a prayer. She didn't say anything. She just ran. She crossed the massive room and crashed into his chest. His arms came around her, pulling her so tight she thought her ribs would break. He buried his face in her hair, his whole body shaking. "They shot at me," she sobbed into his shirt. "They knew where I was, at Sarah's. They tried to kill me." "I know," he whispered, his voice thick and broken. "I know, I had men I couldn't let you. I'm so sorry, Mia Cara. I'm so sorry." He had known. He had let her go, but he hadn't left her unprotected. His men had been outside Sarah's, too. "It wasn't a lie," she cried, clinging to him. You're not him. I am nothing like him," he swore, pressing kisses into her hair, her temple, her cheek. "I am yours, only yours." They sank to the floor together, two broken pieces, clinging to each other in the wreckage. The war was outside, but in that moment, In the darkness of the penthouse, they had finally, truly chosen each other. The penthouse became a tomb of glass and silence. After that night, after she had returned to him, the war Alessio had been waging went quiet, but it was the quiet of a predator gathering itself to strike. He no longer used the living room as a command center. He sequestered himself in his study, the heavy oak doors remaining closed for hours on end. Amelia lived in the hush. She would bring him coffee, her hand steady as she knocked. He would open the door, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep, the skin stretched tight over his cheekbones. He would look at her as if she were a ghost, a mirage of the peace he was fighting for. "You should eat," she would say. "I will," he murmured. Taking the cup, his fingers would brush hers, a brief, desperate contact before he retreated back into the world of maps and whispers. She knew he was planning something. The air in the penthouse was stretched thin, humming with an unspoken, lethal intent. The Verettis had made it personal. They had hunted her. They had violated the one rule that mattered in his world. Family was off limits. And Amelia, he had made it clear, was his. She found him one night, not in the study, but on the balcony. It was 3 a.m. The city below was a galaxy of dormant lights. He was dressed in black, just standing, watching the horizon. Amelia came up behind him, sliding her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against the hard muscle of his back. He didn't startle. He just covered her hands with his own. "You're going to do something," she whispered. It wasn't a question. He was silent for a long time. "It has to be finished," he finally said, his voice rough. "There is no truce. There is no negotiation. Not after Sarah's. I know." She held him tighter. "I'm not asking you not to. I know you have to. But I am asking." She faltered, the words catching in her throat. He turned in her arms, his hands framing her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. The moonlight carved his face into sharp, vulnerable angles. "What, Miyakara? Ask me. Promise me," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Promise me you won't die. Promise me you won't disappear. I can't be alone again. Alessio, I finally found you. Don't make me lose you." His expression crumpled. The mask of the dawn, the ruthless leader, fell away, leaving just the man. He leaned his forehead against hers, his eyes closing. "Amelia," he breathed, the name a prayer and a confession. He didn't make a promise he couldn't keep. He didn't lie to her and say it was safe. He simply cupped her face and kissed her. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of sealing. It was deep and slow and tasted of whiskey and fear and a terrible, unbreakable vow. He pulled back, his dark eyes holding hers. "I will always come back to you," he whispered. "In this life or the next, I will always come back." 2 nights later, he was gone. She woke up in the cold emptiness of the bed. There was no note. The penthouse was silent. Even the guards outside the elevator were gone. There was just the city and the crushing, absolute stillness. Amelia spent the next 8 hours in hell. She paced the living room, from the window to the kitchen, from the sofa to the hall. She made coffee she didn't drink. She turned on the television, but the noise of the morning news was an unbearable intrusion. Every siren on the street below sent a bolt of ice through her veins. She was a raw, exposed nerve. She thought of his promise. "I will always come back to you." But he hadn't said how. He hadn't said the whole thing. At 4 p.m, the sun was beginning to dip, casting long, golden shadows across the marble floor. The private elevator chimed. Amelia froze, her heart stopping in her chest. The doors opened. It was Luca, his face grim, his suit jacket torn at the shoulder. He was supporting another man, his second in command, who had a makeshift bandage wrapped around his arm. But they weren't supporting Alessio. "Where is he?" Amelia demanded, her voice a thin, reedy sound she didn't recognize. "Luca, where is he?" Luca looked at her, his eyes filled with a pained respect. "He is coming. Ma'am, he's right behind us." 2 more of Alessio's men appeared from the elevator. They were carrying him. Amelia's world dissolved. He was conscious, barely. His face was ashen, covered in sweat and grime. His black shirt was ripped open, and his entire left side, from his ribs to his hip, was soaked in a dark, terrifying crimson. "No," she whispered, her hands flying to her mouth. "No, Alessio." "Get him to the bedroom," Luca commanded. "The doctor is on his way up the service elevator." "No doctor," Alessio rasped, his eyes fluttering open, searching for her. He found her. "Emilia, no doctor. They'll report it." "Alessio, you are bleeding to death," Luca argued. "No, doctor," he insisted, his hand weakly reaching for her. Emilia ran to his side as they laid him on the bed, his blood instantly staining the pristine white sheets. "I'm here," she said, her voice shaking so hard she could barely speak. "I'm right here." "Get it," he breathed, his teeth clenched in agony. "In the bathroom, the black bag, please." "Luca, get everyone out, though," Emilia ordered, her panic suddenly solidifying into a cold, hard purpose. "Get out, now. Guard the door. No one comes in. No one." Luca nodded, his face pale, and herded the men out of the room, closing the door behind him. Emilia ran into the master bathroom. Under the sink, behind the towels, was a black duffel bag. She ripped it open. It was a trauma kit, gauze, antiseptic, sutures, sterile needles, and small bottles of unlabeled painkillers. She brought it back, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold the supplies. Alessio's eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. "Alessio, stay with me," she commanded. Grabbing a towel and pressing it hard against the gushing wound in his side, he cried out, a raw, inhuman sound that tore her heart in two. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry, but you have to stay awake. You promised you would come back to me. You are not allowed to leave me." His eyes opened, a sliver of pained awareness. "It's just a graze," he lied, his voice a faint whisper. "It is not a graze," she said, her tears dripping onto his face. She pulled the towel away. It was a deep, ragged tear, a bullet wound that had ripped along his ribs. It was still bleeding, fast. "You have to clean it," he managed to say. "The needle stitches it. You have to—" "I can't," she cried. "I don't know how. I'll hurt you." "You won't," he gasped, his hand finding her wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "You have the steadiest hands. I trust you. I only trust you." She looked at him, at this magnificent, dangerous man, laid low and bleeding on their bed, placing his life in her untrained hands. "Okay," she breathed. "Okay." For the next hour, she worked. She poured antiseptic into the wound, and he screamed into a pillow, his body arching off the bed. She cried as she did it, her own tears blinding her. I'm sorry. It's okay," he panted. "It's okay. Mia cara, keep going." She threaded the surgical needle, her hands shaking so much the first time that she dropped it. She took a deep breath, picked up the second one, and made the first stitch. He was quiet, his eyes squeezed shut, but a single tear traced a path from his eye through the grime on his temple. She stitched him up, her movements becoming cleaner, more certain with each pass. She was binding him to her, binding him to this life. When she was done, she wrapped his entire torso in tight, sterile bandages. She collapsed on the bed next to him, her entire body trembling with the adrenaline of a survivor. He was pale, breathing shallowly, but his eyes were open. He was looking at her. "You did it," he whispered. "You're an idiot," she whispered back, touching his face, her hand sticky with his blood. "I know." And then they cried. They didn't speak. They just lay there, side by side, overwhelmed by the cost of their survival. She cried for the blood, for the violence, for the terror of losing him. He cried for what he had put her through, for the war he had brought to her door. They cried until there were no tears left, just the sound of their raw, ragged breathing in the quiet room. He had kept his promise. He had come back. Days later, the world outside resumed its spin. Alessio was healing, his color returning, his temper with it. He chafed under her care, but his eyes followed her everywhere she went, filled with an awe and a devotion that hadn't been there before. The Veretti family was broken. Their leader was gone, their operations in ruins. The war was over. A week after the attack. Emilia was reading on the sofa when Alessio's phone rang. He answered it. His voice clipped. Good. Make sure it sticks. He hung up and looked at her. What? She asked. Brandon, he said simply. He was arrested this morning. Apparently, he was found in possession of a significant amount of illegal narcotics, enough to put him away for a very long time. Amelia looked at him. He doesn't do drugs. He does now, Alessio said, his expression flat. He will never touch you again. He will never even think of your name again. It's finished. All of it. He had tied up every loose end. He had erased every monster. Life settled into a new kind of normal. Amelia went back to work at the corner read, the first day. She was flanked by 2 guards who stood awkwardly by the poetry section. But she went. She needed to feel the paper, to smell the dust, to be herself. Alessio's world was still his world. He still took meetings. He still ran his empire. But something had changed. He was home by 6 every night. He turned his phone off during dinner. He had seen what he stood to lose, and the cost was too high. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Amelia was shelving a new shipment of biographies. The bell above the door chimed. Be right with you, she called, not looking up. Take your time. I'm just browsing. Her hands froze. She stood up slowly and peeked through the shelf. Alessio. He was standing in the mystery aisle, wearing jeans and a gray sweater, looking completely, utterly normal, and he was alone. There were no guards outside. No sedan idling at the curb, just him. Alessio, she said, walking around the aisle. What are you doing here? Where is everyone? He smiled, a real, unguarded smile that lit up his eyes. I gave them the day off. I gave them all the day off. Is that safe? She whispered, her gaze automatically scanning the street outside the window. Probably not, he admitted, but I'm stepping back. Amelia, from the ugly parts, I'm handing them off. It's time. Why? For you, he said, stepping closer. I've spent my whole life building an empire of fear. I'm done. I just want to build a life. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. With you. She looked up at him. This dangerous, powerful man who was willing to lay down his arms for her. He leaned in and kissed her, right there in the aisle between true crime and biography. It was slow and certain, and it tasted like their future. It was a kiss of promise, not of survival. You are my peace, Amelia, he murmured against her lips. And you, she whispered back, are my storm. That night they walked. They left the penthouse and walked downtown, toward the waterfront. There were no guards, no car following. Just the 2 of them, hands clasped, fingers laced together. The night air was cool, carrying the scent of the ocean and the city. They walked along the pier, the dark water of the harbor lapping gently against the pilings. They didn't talk, they just walked. 2 people against the skyline, invisible and anonymous. Amelia stopped, leaning against the railing, looking out at the Statue of Liberty in the distance. She was no longer running. She was no longer hiding. Alessio came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. He was a solid, warm wall at her back. She was safe, but she knew she would never be entirely safe. His world would always be there, a shadow just under the surface, but looking at their joined hands, his rough, scarred skin against her smooth, pale skin, she knew it didn't matter. He was her storm, and she was his peace, and this quiet, dangerous promise of forever was finally, truly hers. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We truly hope you enjoyed the journey of Amelia and Alessio. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment and say hello. If you love stories like this, please consider subscribing to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories, for new chapters and brand new adventures every week. And finally, please share your thoughts on the story in English. We read every comment and love hearing from you.